thought I'd speak a little bit about the self that we think we are, and its dilemma. It's actually in an impossible position. And it helps if we know that. It helps if we know that we can be merciful to ourselves. And we can begin to move into or discover what we are beyond it. So an impossible position. So this self that we think we are is charged with the task of getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. Pretty simple mission. And it tries to negotiate with all the conditions of life to bring that about. External conditions, internal conditions. It tries to anticipate what's going to happen, anticipate other people's reactions. It does a lot of anticipating, knowing how things work, anticipating, reading people. And yet it's kind of built into reality that we will fail at times to get what we want or to avoid what we don't want. I was thinking of the little phrase, born to fail. There's a book way back when, Born to Win. Don't really remember it. I'm not even sure if that I read it, but my phrase is born to fail. Of course, we're born to fail in the obvious way that this body that's born is meant to die. It will die, it will fail. But in the meanwhile, there's all these other little failures to get what we want or avoid what we don't want. Life keeps dishing up. And at times we can flow with that. We can go with that. But there's this funny kind of backwash that comes from the experience of not getting what we want or not being able to avoid the bad things. And so there's this kind of buildup inside of our nervous system, fear, which is the tacit recognition that we don't actually control all the conditions that things depend on. And shame. Shame is a funny one, but shame is what selves take on when they, in some way, when they fail and they begin to, have a belief that means there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me if I can't get someone to like me. There's something wrong with me if someone's mad at me. There's something wrong with me if people laugh at me. There's something wrong with me if I forget to notice something that if I'd noticed it, I could have prevented, and instead it went wrong. So it's like this sense of self we have has this shadow that it casts of fear and shame. And some people lean more to one to the other. Some people seem a little more shame-bound. Others a little more fear-bound. And there's a kind of a more or less in general about it. But this is the territory of being human. And once in a while, things come along that really break our heart. Things happen we can't prevent, much as we might try. Or we try really hard and we fail. And there can be this crushing sense at times of failure, of just not quite being up to the task. So, the sense of self takes a lot of bruises. And as if we don't do enough bruising of ourselves with self-criticism, of course we get criticism from outside. We get grades, we get evaluations. But there's a crack in all of this. There's a bright side, if I can put it that way. There's a place for the light to come in. And this is really where the teaching of the radiant core is important. Because right in those moments when we fail, there's a possibility. There's a possibility of waking up to the truth that we're here in life and we actually don't control the course of things. Of course, realizing that can just make you scared. That's a very typical reaction. And try even harder. But hopefully, if you come in contact with the Dharma, another possibility begins to dawn, which is the possibility of peace, the possibility of being at peace with what is. And so in the service of that, I have suggested here in this class, in various classes, that you might meet experiences with the phrase, there's nothing wrong here. Because so much of this failure that we face individually and collectively comes with that sense of wrongness. And it's tricky to use this phrase. It can't be done with the head. It's not an idea, it's not a philosophy. Because of course, there are things that are wrong, there are things that are unjust, there are things that we should work diligently to change. So in some sense, yeah, there are things wrong here. But what I've found in my own practice when I've used the nothing wrong here, it creates a space. If you actually drop down to the place that knows that it's true, or I could say the place that's willing to be here with life on its own terms. There's a peace there. And we have to bless the whole thing. This is key. In other words, not just the external messed up situation, if you want to put it that way, the external thing that seems to be going wrong, but the internal reactivity is also potentially what we're seeing and going wrong, which we can also say, nothing wrong here. And again, if you use it not as a philosophy, but you use it as a way to kind of unhook your ego from what's going on, unhook your sense of self with its duty to get what you want and avoid what you don't want. Or the way we project that collectively, not just personally what I want and what I don't want, but what I want for everyone. or what I want for my family, or what I want for something else. If we just, there's something about the phrase, there's nothing wrong here, I just find, because it's a little startling, it's kind of contrary to what we believe. It has a possibility of kind of like taking the latch off of the heart, just kind of removing the latch that's there, and something falls open. And in between, perhaps, there might be a moment of heartbreak. One might actually need to feel something like heartbreak. Saying nothing wrong here doesn't quite get you out of that moment of heartbreak. And the heart was made to be broken, to be disappointed, to have the things that are dear to it end, disappear, fail, die, to be separated at times from what it loves. And so, because we are human and because we live in the world of conditions, we cannot but help to try to maintain conditions and get what we want. Of course, we want to eat, we want shelter, we want good things for our family, we want a lot of different things. And as conditioned beings, there's a good and a bad to all of this. But it would be a shame to never know what's beyond that. It would be a shame to never know the place of unconditional surrender, which is actually the deepest truth of our being. To have that sense of self subside. And sometimes it takes a real doozy to get that to happen. It's not by accident that often people wake up in moments of tragedy. It's actually a really common time when people wake up, because their sense of power and agency is suddenly blown away. And they are suddenly just a heart witnessing the smoldering ashes of something. And there can be just this vast sense of peace there. Obviously, it doesn't have to happen that way. Of course, many people have their hearts broken. Many people have things go spectacularly wrong, and they harden around it and suffer. Fear and suffering abound. So it's no necessity. And oddly, it's not even something we can will, this waking up. It's kind of a grace that happens to us. But it helps. It helps to have heard that it exists. It helps to have heard at least the idea of unconditional peace, unconditional surrender. It helps to in your practice, to notice the awake, empty space you are. And to do that frequently. Those are little awakenings, if you want to look at it that way. Little awakenings, but somehow the belief in the self remains until it doesn't, until something subsides, until it subsides to the point where one realizes, oh, wow. One is immersed in a field of interconnection without any separation. And all the while I thought I was doing something, there was just intelligence arising. Intelligence, choice, thoughts, understanding. All these things arising and working together in the field of mind. So the glimpse of that, of the radiant core, is that it appears in that moment of subsiding. We practice that in meditation when I invite you to just rest in being, when I coach you to relax the anxious doer. We're approximating it. We're letting something fall awake, perhaps only for just a moment, in this stream of conditioned experience. And so I caution you about the Dharma. An interesting thing for a Dharma teacher to say. I caution you about the Dharma because sometimes it seems to offer the ego a perfect system of perfecting itself. A system of doing, a system of practice that you can diligently apply to yourself and come to some perfected end. That's true and it's not true. The perfected end is a subsiding of this self. And the coming to be of an awake presence. That is infinite. And yet embodied. And so at some point in that path, one has to give up controlling experience. That's not an easy thing to do. We're so built for it. We're so built for trying to control experience. It's not even something we can do. It's why I often try to speak to something in each of you, which is awake and which comes awake when I talk about it. This possibility of unconditional peace and acceptance. It's not something you make come awake. It just responds. It starts to come online. And we start to discover the nature of our vast, limitless heart. And it's humbling to a sense of self that wants to get it, hears about it and can't get it. It's humbling. So just let that relax in you. Let it get things like the groceries. Let it get things that are gettable. Because ultimately what you're discovering here is what cannot be gotten and cannot be lost. What is here, what you are, it cannot be gotten and cannot be lost. If it's something you can get, it's something you can lose.